Welcome to Gen Z Hoops, the Gen Z basketball, coaching, and sports business show.
Welcome to Gen Z Hoops, episode 400, Gen Z Hoops guests. Where are they now? I'm your host, Ashton Khoorchand, and on the first episode of our new relaunch, I'm super excited to share the stories of our guests that have since been promoted or switched jobs in this competitive sports industry. You'll hear stories of people that have gone from the G League to the NBA, like Micah Fraction, assistant coach to head coach like Ronnie Burrell, and director of basketball operations to general manager like Nick Lagios. I actually met Nick personally when he coached the Super League Athletic Academy Greece tour each of the last 2 years. So it was incredible to hear his story with my mentor, John Harder-Phils. He gives insight on his journey from the very start, way before he got to sit in that GM chair. A little bit about myself. I'm currently a senior at Salisbury School, and next year I'll be attending Hobart College, where I hope to continue to play basketball and fulfill my dream of playing at the college level. I've been around the game my whole life, and I've always known at some point that the ball will stop bouncing. 3 years ago, actually, I was really inspired by JH when he created Gen Z Hoops. So now I'm really honored to have the opportunity to continue the Gen Z legacy, and hopefully down the line, I can work in basketball as well. I'm a big Heat fan. As you can see, I'm repping Jimmy Butler's brand, Big Face Coffee. And hey, if I keep this up, you never know. I could be the next Pat Riley down there in South Beach. With all that being said, please enjoy a look back at all of our successful guests and their stories working their way up. Thank you.
Yes, I was. I was drafted with the 16th pick of the first round by the New Jersey Nets. Bunch of great guys. Was traded in the middle or the start of my third year in Jersey. Butch Beard took over. Got a chance to play for him for about a year and a half. Was traded to Philly. Was there in Philadelphia for 3 years. Played for John Lucas, Johnny Davis, and then Larry Brown. In the middle of Larry Brown's time, I was waived, but I knew I was getting picked up by the Miami Heat. Picked up by Pat Riley, great teams, Alonzo Mourning, Tim Hardaway, Jamal Mashburn, Vashawn Leonard, Dan Marley, Keith Askins, great, Mark Strickland, Dwayne Coswell, some great players there. We're right on the cusp. We were a really good team, but weren't quite a championship team. And I was there for basically about 2.5 years, 7 years total was my NBA playing experience. I actually signed a 1-year deal with the Pacers after going overseas. But that was a short stay in Indiana, in Indiana, and then played a little bit in the minor leagues and then played overseas for a little bit and then hung it up after about 9 or 10 years.
The head coach was at the College of Charleston. He had recruited somebody else that I went to high school with. And when he got the job in Valdosta, I got the opportunity to go down there and worked out, did really well, got a scholarship, and just worked my way up, man. 4 years, eventually kind of went from being like the 12th, 13th man on the roster to being first team all conference team MVP. We were 24-2 regular season my senior year. And it was a great ride down there. And after that, I was just kind of at a crossroads. I didn't know if I had an opportunity to go work for Bank of America. I had an opportunity to get into coaching or, try to pursue the basketball. I did a couple of exposure camps, man. I remember my senior year, I would go up to the press box and just cut tapes. Back then it was so hard to send, you were sending VHS and not even DVDs. Back in 2004. So just cutting tapes, man. I went on the Eurobasket.com and sent emails out to every coach, every team I could find. A handful of them hit me back. I went up, made cut my own highlight tapes, about 12, 13 VHSs, sent them out to coaches in Europe, agents in Europe, here, whoever responded to me and got a hit. Went to a couple of exposure camps. There was one in particular up in Richmond at VCU at the time, which was really good, had some really good players. And a scout in Germany saw me, referenced me to an agent. And I ended up playing in second division Germany, out of college, got the opportunity and, just worked my way up. Was there for 3 or 4 months.
The job of being a beat writer is to be present. It's really important to be present. That's how you learn a team, you build a rapport with players and coaches and scouts and executives. That's how you really learn the rhythms of a team, and the rhythms of the job too. There's no manual for doing this job. There's no right and wrong way to walk into a pregame locker room or a postgame locker room and ask questions to build a story or to react to the game that just happened. everything is just on the fly. And so again, you kind of just have to learn the rhythms of players and their moods and the rhythms of the league, and when guys are available, when they're not, how to navigate. Can I grab this guy coming off the court from his pregame routine as opposed to waiting till he's in the locker? There's just a lot of like the protocols that you just kind of pick up over time. So, but being present is really important. Like what it was like, there's that Woody Allen quote about like 95% of life or 99% of life is just showing up. Like being a beat writer is a lot about showing up. It's about just being there and being present, observing, doing what Shaq used to tell us. This was usually in a different context, but Shaq used to love saying, "Write what you see, brother." Now, usually meant write what you see. Usually meant write what you see, which is that Kobe's not passing me the ball enough, or write what you see, which is that the referees weren't calling all the fouls against me. But I think of that quote a lot because I think it's a perfectly distilled, simplified, but very accurate version of what the job description is. Like that's being a reporter. Write what you see. Go. There's a little more to it than that, but go out there, cover a game, cover a practice, cover whatever, cover a protest, cover anything. It's a lot of observation and then contextualizing that observation.
I'll never forget the first game that I coached, right? I was probably 18. And the guy who was supposed to, the original head coach of that, it was an 8th grade B team. We were down 17-4 at the half. Okay, this is Dripping Springs versus Lake Travis. Who cares? I remember it still. 17-4, we were down. I go in at the halftime, and the coach is kind of like, he was getting ready for the A-team game. The A-team. He's like, I was like, well, are you gonna go talk to those guys? And he's like, you can have them. I'm gonna get ready for the A-team game. So I was like, hey, perfect. I was all about it. So I go and talk to the guys. We're down 17-4. We end up coming back. This is middle school 8th grade B team. We end up coming back and we end up winning like 24-22. But I'll remember, talk about young coach and all that stuff. I remember there was a timeout at the end of that game. I called timeout and I'm trying to drop a play on the board. Who knows what I'm drawing because it's completely trash. I'm sure of it. But I'm trying to drop a play because that's what, you're supposed to do because you're a coach and you call up the timeout and you're supposed to have the play. And I'm trying to draw a play and I start trying to draw the play and my hand is shaking because I'm like excited and I'm like all these things. And I remember one of the kids who was like an 18 player, his name's Ty Mullins. He was watching, kind of like supporting, but he was watching. He's like, I started trying to draw on the board. He's like, "Coach, your hand's shaking." And I remember saying, I was like, "Shut up, Ty. Y'all pay attention." And I started to try to kind of fake it till I make it. But it's funny how you can get from that position there, that point in your development, right, as a coach, to, now you're in, a G League playoff situation or an NBL Canada Game 5, series defining game, and you're in a timeout and you feel the confidence of knowing how to handle that. You go to rewind 20 years earlier and you've got a shaky hand and you're in an 8th grade B team gym where with 25 people watching and you still feel that connection to the game.
I think there's a difference between West Coast and East Coast basketball. There definitely was a difference in the way Coach Walton prepared, Coach Kobe Carl prepared, and the way Brett Brown and Connor Johnson, the head coach of the Delaware Blue Coats, there's definitely a difference. And the 76er organization took a lot of pride in keeping a lot of stuff in-house, which was difficult for the Lakers, given all the media attention when LeBron came. And Coach Brown specifically, maybe from that Spurs kind of branch, he was a really detailed coach. He had something called a 76tionary. He had names and labels for just about everything. The prep work was different in the development program. And even their analytics department was interesting because they had in-house, which most teams do, but they had a different formula for a lot of things. And I learned so much from it. It was great. Once you're in the middle of the season and training camp starts, though, you are locked in. I mean, you're going home to the gym, to the airport, to practice, So once everything gets locked in, being on, for me, being in DC versus being in Portland, I don't think it makes too much of a difference, right? Once everything gets going. But the part of learning from all the different coaches, that's something that I really, really enjoyed and something I was very, very grateful for.
My experience in the G League has just been tremendous. As far as, first, I think people don't understand or appreciate how good the players are in the league. And it's only getting better, right? As the investment from teams now, you've seen teams that have invested in it and how it's played a really, really important role in their success at the NBA level. So the investment is only increasing across the league. And as a result, the players, the depth of talent in the league is only getting better. But that's the first thing I think that struck me, was the players were even better than I knew. These are very, very accomplished players, at the collegiate level, or, some guys that maybe are younger, that came out a little bit earlier, that have tremendous upside and potential. So I think the G League is just an unbelievable platform for players and coaches to learn, because it is, the emphasis at its core is it's about development, right? So we're in a situation where certainly winning is important, but it's not our primary objective. Our primary objective is to grow and develop, players and coaches for that matter. So you have the ability to try things, maybe, and that they wouldn't be at a more pressurized, NBA level or college, even at the, high major college level, where there's that assumption, hey, there's that pressure to win right away. And not to say that winning isn't important. It's an important part of somebody's development. You want to teach them to become a winning player. But I think, that's what's so great about it, is there's outstanding players and there's just such a commitment to the developmental process. And then the last thing I'd say that's made me a much better coach is you have to be so adaptable in the G League. Night to night, you don't necessarily know who you're going to have on your roster. Are you going to have your two ways? Did someone get called up? And obviously these are highly productive players for you, right? That you're kind of counting on. And so everyone has to be ready. And you don't necessarily know who your opponent's going to have maybe until a couple hours before the game. So your preparation or your game plan could change a little bit based on who they have too. So you have to be adaptable, and it forces you as a coach to, think one step ahead constantly. And so from that standpoint, I can't speak enough about my experience in the G League. Has been tremendous. I think I've experienced more growth as a coach, in my time in the G League than maybe across all my time in the profession.
So, I mean, the way I did it wasn't exactly the straightest path to get there. Like, you definitely don't need the athletic training certification, especially now that athletic training is a master's only degree. So it's even less attainable. You really just need to technically you just need to graduate from college with something to get your CSCS. But really what you should have is probably a background in either exercise science. Athletic training is great. It gives you a super deep background, probably, more than most strength coaches are going to have. But like I said, that requires an extra 2 years on top of that school-wise. So really you need exercise science. You could go with something like, I know different places have coaching degrees, and also you could probably get away with physical education, but having that kinesiology background is really big. So then CSCS, you sit for that. That's through the NSCA. That's probably the most widely accepted certification for strength coaches. You also have CSCCA is another one that's gaining traction if you get a job more in the college setting that is more specifically geared toward that. And they also have NHSCCA, which is geared toward high school. So you could go any one of those routes. There's a lot of other certifications out there, but most of those are more satisfactory for someone who's doing personal training or private stuff. If you're trying to get hired by any organization, I would recommend just get the CSCS because everybody's going to take it, versus, having to pick and choose employers like that. And then strength conditioning it's almost become a little bit oversaturated with people. So you're going to want to do some sort of, if you're in college and you're interested, intern with the sports programs that are already there. Go talk to your strength coaches, even if you're not an athlete there. Go talk to your strength coaches there. Try to intern with them. Try to do some shadowing, because a lot of times people are going to look at your resume and say, well, you were at, X university. You're at Florida State University. You had this great strength coach there. Why didn't you ever intern under them? Throw this resume in the trash. So get your internship in, and hopefully that internship will lead to some graduate assistantship opportunity, because most places are looking for you to have a master's. Master's wise, it doesn't really matter what you get it in a lot of times. Obviously there's masters that could help propel you along knowledge wise a lot better versus just getting like an MBA or something like that. But what you're using your master's for is to get that graduate assistantship, get 2 more years of work experience on your resume, where you're actually getting to work with teams and not just being underneath people. And then you may have opportunities in the field to be able to get a job.
Ultimately, I got this advice from everybody I worked for. And then when I was able to get the head coaching job, ultimately you have to be yourself, right? If you're not authentic in your approach, then I think your players and the people around you are going to see right through you. But it was nice to work for some really terrific coaches. BJ Dunn at Gettysburg, Jake Scott, who I mentioned before, is now the head coach at Cayuga College, which was just announced yesterday. Coach Neshi at NYU, who won over 500 games. So what I tried to do was take a little bit from each coach that I thought could fit who I am. And then things I didn't think would fit, who I am as a person or as a coach. I opted not to carry those over. But I think being at all those different schools and those different experiences, you just try to constantly learn from who you're working for, try to see the game in a different lens, and hopefully it will lead to success at St. Joe's.
When I was growing up, when I was in high school, I loved watching Breanna Stewart play. I did. And then I found out she was a Syracuse girl, like from Syracuse, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I really love her game. I don't know. She's a lot taller than me, but I feel like we're similar in the terms of we're both versatile. We have that kind of game going. Her and if I ever pick a men's player from the NBA, I always go for KD. I feel like his versatility is pretty awesome too. I also like Kevin Love. I feel like he's kind of resembles me too. Like he gets rebounds and he can shoot, But Breanna Stewart, women's wise, is definitely someone I've looked up to for a while. Good player.
No, it was surreal. He walked into the interview that I was doing with Kevin Pritchard and Peter Dinwiddie and introduced himself, and you're trying to stay composed, and you got a job to try to get, but at the same time you're shaking Larry Bird's hand, and he's a really funny guy. He's a really good guy. He's straightforward and honest. You know exactly where you stand with Larry at all times. And I really appreciated the time that he spent with me, and he even came up that first year that I got hired to our training camp and sat with me for a couple of practices in a row and kind of told me what he was looking for and looking at, and just to be able to pick his brain and ask him questions and have his cell phone number. As a little kid, you can't believe you're texting Larry Bird happy birthday, every year or whatever it is. So it's an awesome experience just to get to know him. But you definitely have fanboy moments even when you've been with him for a couple years. And I'm lucky he's still in a consultant capacity for the Pacers. So I do get to see him from time to time. Yeah, we've got group text for everything, each group, and, email and calls, and, you just try to make sure that you're kind of touching base with everybody as often as you can. When it's important, imperative, call the Pacers, fill them in, get their input on something, and then so we can make a decision. Otherwise, maybe it's just, craft an email, just kind of laying out what's happening, what's going on. Send it out. We have a 2-week report that we do with the Pacers where I put together a kind of a comprehensive look at what happened the last 2 weeks with the Mad Ants and send it off to the higher ups with the Pacers so that everybody's, understanding what's happening. But yeah, communication is huge. We're big about laying out expectations to the players, to the staff, to agents, so that everybody knows exactly where we stand at any given time. It's always better when people go in with a clear idea of what's expected rather than just trying to figure it out on the fly. And you spend this awkward in-between time trying to get acclimated. But, we really rely on truthful and efficient communication to make sure that everyone is on the same page at all times.
Well, Aaron Fern, who is an Australian coach, was the head coach of the Cairns Taipans in the professional league in Australia. And he had the lowest budget there, and he had to try to figure out how to compete with the bigger budget teams. And he had some very out-of-the-box ideas, and he created this tag-up system. Now he's an assistant coach at UNC Charlotte. And there is no correlation between good offensive rebounding teams and bad transition defensive teams. You know, it's a common misnomer, right? That being a good offensive rebounding team and is going to make you a bad or hurt you in transition. Now, what will happen if you send 5 to the glass and you're not a good offensive rebounding team, then you'll get your ass kicked in transition. But if we're getting ready to play your team, we're getting ready to play Xavier. We lead the league in offensive rebounds, and we're sending 5 to the glass. You got 3 days to prepare for us in practice. You know that's what we do. We're the best at it. What are you doing in practice every day? So you're working on box outs all week, and if one of your players leaks out and we get the offensive rebound, he's probably coming out the game, right? So if you really think of it, being a good offensive rebounding team actually slows the transition defense because you're worried about giving up the offensive rebound. As a result, you're not going to leak out. You know, so if you end up, you know, we had games with 20, 25 offensive rebounds, and we'd end up having 10, 15 extra shots on our opponents in Hapoel Jerusalem. And if you're a team, you know, like for us, we didn't press and trap and create extra possessions off turnovers, right? Offensive rebounds gave us the extra possessions and extra turnovers. If you're a pressing team, like let's say you're, you know, what Shaka Smart was at VCU, you know, then it flows in perfectly to what you're doing because you have to be up to press the ball anyways if you're sending 5 to the glass. Offensive rebounds are the 3rd highest percentage play in the game. And if every coach talks about boxing out, why are you not talking about crashing the glass? Tagging up is a combination, right? And what it really is, the way that Coach Aaron Fern does it, is it's a transition defensive system, and the byproduct of it is offensive rebounds. In Hapoel Jerusalem, I took his system and I tweaked it based on our personnel to where we were sending a little bit more aggressively than him. But for his system, you know, it's about sending 5 to the glass, you know, to be matched up in transition defense. And as a result, you're getting offensive rebounds. And his rules are you can't run by the guys. So you're always between your man and the basket defensively. Once a shot is taken, you're just pushing them inside 15 feet and kind of scrumming them into the paint. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's like athleticism and length is helpful, right? But not every player has that. And if you go through and you watch, I mean, really break down and watch the elite rebounders that aren't the tallest, longest, most athletic guy, what you end up seeing are a bunch of skills that go into rebounding. And for us as coaches, right, that's exactly like we'll say box out, we'll say effort, we'll say go get it, two-handed rebounds, you know, but there's so much more that goes into being a good rebounder than that. You know, it's like passing, right? Like we just say, be a good passer. Well, there's all kinds of passes you have to throw. You have to be able to throw it with two hands. Nowadays, if you really watch it, like the elite passers are one-hand passers, which goes against a lot of coaching philosophy. And if you watch it at a young age in Europe, I mean, those kids at 13, 14 are coming off a pick and roll, slinging it with one hand, you know, to the corner. And in rebounding, it's all the same. And what ends up happening is if you're not drilling the skills that go into becoming a better rebounder, you're naturally not going to improve in those areas. And the mentality of like, this guy's a bad rebounder or a good rebounder, you know, there's more to it. Some of it have a natural gift, but everyone can improve, and it's more than just effort. And if you watch elite rebounders are one-handed extension catch rebounders. And most rebounders, they rebound within their area and they rebound with their arms bent. Like everything that they catch is arms bent. Elite rebounders rebound out of their area with their arms extended, and they can catch a rebound with one hand with their arm extended up at 90 degrees, right? And then straight out to the side. And those are skills that you have to drill. You have to drill the catching, you have to drill the timing, and you have to drill it with both hands. And then there's some other skills that go into it on early effort rebounds, right? Like the first one to the ball is going to get it. And so when players are beginning to shoot the release, like if you watch, elite rebounders in the NBA, you can watch Kevin Love, as players begin to start their shooting motion, he's already making his early effort to get there. Right. Then you got other guys that are really good at wedging their defender under the rim and taking them out of position. So, I mean, there's multiple skills, that go into how do you drill it. And for us in Hapoel Jerusalem, like our concern going into that season was going to be defensively and rebounding. We had a bunch of bigs that weren't great rebounders, and we did a lot of individual skill work. We didn't even do rebounding drills as a team. We did a lot of individual skill work to build those skills. And then in practice and in games and film, we just held them accountable to what they were supposed to be doing.
Some of the more senior coaches that have been around told me that working in the video room is like getting your PhD in basketball in the NBA. I credit Brett Brownmeyer, who's now the head coach of the Long Island Nets, told me this, and I remember it. And I didn't know what to expect after he said that, but after a year working with the Brooklyn Nets staff as an assistant video and player development, you kind of get a crash course into the NBA. You learn every team's tendencies. You work the long hours. You watch the most film in the building, and it's just a great way to familiarize yourself with all of the players, other team styles of play. And it's something, the skill sets that you learn working video comes the hard way. It's a difficult job, but it's one of the most valuable experiences I've had personally. That year was very valuable to my career, I believe. And I think that I learned things that I'll be using hopefully for a long time.
The catapult was just my playing career itself. I started playing when I was 13, and then when I was 14, I ended up going to high school at Summit Christian. And the day before my first game as a varsity student, I was rear-ended with my assistant coach by a school bus. So that led to me to have a broken neck, had to miss my whole freshman year of high school, and put me on the road to recovery ever since then. I persevered and fought my way back, had a decent high school career. And but another obstacle I faced during my high school time was my recruiting process. And that's what really led me to coaching, because my recruiting process, it was hectic. It was, how do I want to put it, frustrating. It was just a lot of things that I was just unaware of, because I was the first person in my family to play a sport at a high level and to gain some of the attention I gained. My mom and I, we just didn't know how to handle that. You know what I'm saying? We didn't know how to navigate our way through the recruiting process, what to expect, what not to expect, things and so forth like that. So I would say my recruiting process was the first thing that led me to, kind of want to coach, because I'm still a big believer of, my story shouldn't have to repeat itself as much as I can handle it. And then, playing through high school, going to junior college as a qualifier at Santa Fe College in Gainesville, Florida, I struggled there a little bit. I was inconsistent as a freshman, so I didn't garner the interest or the offers that I wanted as a freshman, and chose to come back for my sophomore year, where I felt like I had grown and was ready to take the step in the right direction towards making that dream come true of becoming a Division I athlete. And the first day of practice of my sophomore year, tear my ACL. I think I tore like my MCL, tore like my whole knee up. So, and that was another thing, just as I felt like I was starting to understand what it takes to be the player that I was aspiring to be, boom, there goes another obstacle. So, like I said, we can get into that later on in the story, but those are like one of the two main things that led me to coaching, was like, my recruiting process in high school, and then in college, going through injuries and having to persevere and just see how, you can never take anything for granted. Every day matters, because you just never know when it's over.
Yeah, look, I really think that the team culture outline really began in my Opals days, which is the Australian team. And Tom Maher came in, and I think after we failed to make the Barcelona Olympics in 1992, we had a coaching change, and Tom Maher came in, and in the very first practice we talked about, okay, what kind of culture do we want? And it was, it was involving all the players as well too, because, it's not just being a dictator, this is what we have to be. It's more, you need obviously buy-in and players determining what we needed to make sure that we're going to be the best team we could be. And really that showed a lot, because and that's something all players now from that era can remember, and it's kind of carried over. So that was really key for me. I think team culture and getting buy-in is the most important thing before you can actually have that success. And I think all successful teams, they always go back to talking about the culture and the chemistry that they had that allowed them to be the best team. So look, I learned a lot from those days, which had carried over to, other teams. Different coaches do different ways. But yeah, Dan obviously was very big on that, just coming in and just seeing how you can build that. And, but being in so many teams, you realize what makes a good team and what makes not a very good team. And team culture was right up there. So I've learned a lot to, being an assistant coach is, Dan was a great platform for me because he really mentored me, but he also gave me opportunities to continue to grow in hands-on approach. And, I just love what we do. And now as the head coach, the first thing I do is, what are our themes? So every team I'm a part of, we have themes that we develop, and which is player driven and staff driven. And I believe that just gives us a really good platform to start the process of becoming a championship team.
It's just like, that is what I wanted to do. It's like, I just got to try. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I was pretty naive to think I could just go to the Bay Area and make it work. But that's what I was going to do. Is I'm going to go to the Bay Area. I'm going to work for the Warriors. I'm going to work for Stanford or something. And if someone told me they're going to do that now, I'd be like, you're absolutely crazy. But I think you kind of have to be a little crazy. Geography at that point wasn't too much in my mind at that point. But I went to the Bay Area. I lived my aunt and uncle. They lived in San Francisco. And then my college roommate, he's in Burlingame, just south of San Francisco. So I kind of was staying between their two places, worked basketball camps at, all the local college universities. So I gained a lot of experience. I really had no basketball experience, similar to Nick Reich's story. When he was on our last class, he talked about how he had no experience. He was just like, I want to work in basketball. It's kind of what you have to do. And then, so then I worked the year and a half at Stanford. I learned a ton, but all I did was work. I worked around the clock, it was like basically living in the locker room. That's where I think geography took over. I felt like I wasn't really living. I was working and I wanted to like live again and do what my passion is. So Australia has this 1-year work visa. So it's really easy just to move to Australia. You don't have to go through all this paperwork. You can just like buy it. You can move to Australia. Did that. And I wanted to work in basketball still. That was still the plan. But if I didn't, I was kind of doing my other passion of seeing the world and not just seeing as a tourist, but kind of living like a different culture. So it's 2 birds with 1 stone. And I couldn't suggest Australia enough, either as a visitor or if someone wanted to do that 1-year work holiday visa. Couldn't suggest it enough. It was hard for sure. The amount of couches or places I stayed at was insane. Like aunt and uncle. And then I think 2 friends' places, like their parents in Palo Alto. And then in Australia, Ben O'Neill's place. And I lived in apartments with like cockroaches and wild animals in Australia. It's not like I made no money in basketball in Australia. And then when I was here, I lived in like 5 or 6 different places. I cleaned sailboats. I worked weddings at night until 3 a.m. And then, practice is like 8 a.m. the next day. So it was relentless. But I think now I feel pretty lazy, honestly. But I think you also get so kind of stuck in like, you need to keep progressing in the industry and you do enjoy work. But I think you kind of get like tunnel vision into this type of work ethic because it is somewhat common around you. So you're like, oh, this is normal, but it didn't feel crazy at the time, that's for sure. But now looking back, I was like, wow, that was nuts. Yeah. Well, I think the one thing, how I talked about how the relentless time and effort you have to put into it, that's also positive for people because it's not rocket scientists. You literally just have to work your tail off, and given the right opportunities, you can succeed in this industry. It's not like you have to be a genius to do this. I'm not saying basketball is the most easy thing in the world, but a lot of it, these entry-level jobs, you just got to give everything you have. A lot of it is like brainless and you'll be successful. So that's the one, I think, benefit with this. I think working at Stanford in Australia, what made me succeed with the Lakers is I was doing the same roles for a couple of years. I was working for a basketball team, but I was doing a lot of like laundry, cleaning the floor, making Gatorade, driving players to and from the airport all around the clock. So I think the Lakers just knew I've done that before. I made it very clear I will do anything. I did anything. I've driven to every hospital in Los Angeles and radiology center and slept in parking lots. And I told them that when I was in Australia and when I was at Stanford, that I'll do anything. And I think that's what teams want to hear. They don't want to have to worry about the person on the bottom of the totem pole. So I think by doing that, at the same time, after a couple of years with the Lakers, I'm like, okay, I've been doing this for 6 years. Like I'm pretty burnt out. But the organization has been unbelievable. They fully understood, and I've been able to progress and work my way up through the organization. And I've loved the last 5 years with the Lakers.
Start networking. It doesn't hurt. And there's a lot of great people out there that'll return a text or a call or an email and just say, hey, there's nothing right now, but maybe we can talk in the future. And that's just an uplifting feeling sometimes, like when you just get a response from someone in the business or whatever. So just network, college, G League, whatever it is, it can go a long way, and it's good connections, and you meet good people anyway. And then at 20, I mean, once you get that foot in the door, it's have a sense of urgency. I mean, I remember you always want to help. There's no job too big, too small. Just have that sense of urgency to go out there, and whether you're noticed or not, who cares? You're helping. I remember my first day in Sioux Falls as an intern. I didn't want to step on toes. I didn't want to get in the players' way, the coach's way. And I remember there was a player shooting in the corner by himself, getting his own rebounds. And without asking, I'm just like, forget it. I'm going to just go rebound for this dude. We get talking, us, before practice starts. And then he calls me every single day for training camp. Hey, let's go get shots up. Hey, let's go get shots up. And even that, obviously rebounding is part of the job, but just going, I'm not going to go ask. I'm just going to go do it. Built a relationship. And, being available, whether you're doing laundry until 3 a.m, watching film, breaking down film, whether the coach uses it or not. It's just, man, it's fun. You're watching basketball. You're in the locker room. Whatever it is, you're talking with the coaches, the players. That's what's fun. And, you're working, but that's not a job really. So enjoy what you do. Enjoy the grind. It's, looking back now, I mean, I went through lots of stops, but man, it was so much fun. And I wouldn't change or tweak any of it because I've learned so much. I've met a lot of great players, coaches, trainers, scouts, everything, man. It's a lot of good people you meet along the ride. So yeah, I wouldn't tweak much.
Going back to the days of Atlanta Hawks, I was 22 at the time. I believe maybe I was 23, but Dennis Schroeder was a year younger than me. And just going through the scouting reports, sometimes the guys are goofing off a little bit and they didn't hear what was going on or where they should be. And they might lean over and say, hey, what was this play? Or what was this number? Or where should I be? And you can tell them real quick. And that's kind of how I built my relationship with the younger player, just knowing what's going on. And those little things turn into, I'm going to the gym to shoot tonight. Can you come shoot with me? And that rebounding in the gym at late night turns to, can we do this workout or can we work on something? And that's kind of how you gain respect to the younger players.
What happened, I was going for one internship, ended up not even getting an interview. And I was like, damn, well, that kind of stinks. I thought my resume was pretty good. So I ended up a couple days later, I was like, all right, guess I got to try something new. And I cold emailed the head coach, director of basketball operations, and the general manager for the Liberty, just hoping one of them would hit and hoping I guessed the email correctly. Along those lines, I just, put together personalized messages, and 2 days later, the head coach of Liberty, Coach Will Hopkins, got back to me and said, hey, Matt, are you around Thursday, which was a couple days after that, would love to talk. I was sweating bullets, kind of freaking out, but super excited. And that skill I actually got from Jesse because his junior year, he sent I think 300 cold emails a day. So that was kind of a Jesse K inspiration right there. But it shows that, just reaching out and putting your best foot forward could, make a difference.
Was fortunate enough to where I got drafted in the D League by the Idaho Stampede back in 2008. And then just kind of from there, I also kind of bounced and did some stuff in the ABA, went back to the D League 2010. And that was kind of around the point when I actually got released from the team outside of training camp. It was something to me where that's kind of how I fell into coaching. I was kind of at that point where I was just, okay, do I want to continue? I'd had some opportunities that came up over in Europe that kind of fell through last minute. So it was just something like self-reflection time to where, okay, how much longer do I want to keep chasing this? Or is it time to start looking into moving on? And at the time, honestly, I still didn't even know what moving on meant. And, it was more so for me, it was going to be try to figure it out. And we actually had a family friend of mine who was running a youth academy. So it was 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. He played at Oregon State. So he kind of knew the player coming to the end of his playing career. Then he just kind of approached me and said, hey, I know you're kind of in the middle trying to figure things out at the moment, but if you have any interest in helping out and running this program while you figure it out, we'd love to have you. I think the kids would love learning from you and being around it. And so I jumped at the opportunity. And honestly, John, it was, again, I'm sitting here because of that, to be honest with you.
one of those things where I remember the first practice, I just fell in love with it. And the teaching component of it and working with kids at that age, I mean, they're just sponges, right? Like they want to learn anything and everything. And you get that being around a team feeling, like what someone like myself, I'm used to that from the time I was little. And that was kind of the moment where it's just kind of like, okay, like I want to, this is something I want to do. And obviously, again, fast forward a few years and now we're sitting here talking.
Definitely. So like starting off, like my first introduction to sports, kind of like working in the field, was working at a radio station, Blythe, Arkansas, where I'm from, my hometown. Always knew I wanted to work in sports. I didn't grow past like 5'7", 5'8". So I kind of knew right away, like, you're not going to play in the NBA unless like I just, had crazy skills, which I didn't, and I still don't at this current point in time. So I was like, so how can I get involved with, working in the NBA? Because basketball is my favorite sport, passion. I love NFL too. With basketball, it just sticks out to me. I love the game of basketball. And my dad, he told me, my cousin, he works at a radio station in Blythe, Arkansas called KJM 93.9. And they have an internship that you can do for, I believe it's like 6 to 8 months. And I reached out to him and talked to him, told him what I was trying to do. At the time, I actually, it may surprise me, I was wanting to go into journalism because I like Stephen A. Smith a lot. And I was like, well, I want to do journalism, so I'll be around the game. I'll get to talk to the players, do media and things of that nature. And like literally once I got to college, I did the internship with KJM 93.9 until the end, 6, 8 months. Learned a lot from my cousin working there. The ins and outs, like the behind the scenes stuff that you don't see, like when you're in the control room, broadcasting live on air. Every day I was how you get your resources, like Stephen A. them do, their inside person that they'll never tell, like, hey, how many points did John have last night? What was the final score? Me not having to go to the game because like social media was not a thing, believe it or not, like 6 years ago, like it is now. You just can pop up your phone and be like, oh, Arkansas lost to Milwaukee by 10 points and this guy was the leading scorer, having to tap into those resources. I'd happen to have like a buddy that actually played for the high school team, and he would text me the scores, the points that they would have. And it taught me a lot about just having a lot of networking connections. So that way, even today, it helps you get along in the business world and just move up quicker. More people, and it opened up a lot of doors for you. So that it was a great experience for me working at KJM 93.9. And as I said, going to my first year in college, this is when I met my counselor. I believe her name is Miss Brox. And I was talking to her, and they were like, well, what do you want to do? It's your first time, like, in high school, you still think like, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that. And I told her, I was like, well, I want to work in sports. I want to be work in journalism. And she was like, do you like to write? I was like, nah. I'm like, no, not really. She was like, well, you sure you want to do journalism? And I was like, well, I'm like, I want to work in sports, so I don't know what I really want to do. And I told her, I was like, well, I want to work in the NBA as a general manager. And she told me the best way to do it probably be get a degree in business instead of sports, because if I just got a degree in sports, I would just have like a narrow window, like I only kind of can work in sports with that degree. But if I get business, it's broad and I can do a lot of things on my way to working in the NBA or whatever the case may be. I have a lot more avenues versus just this one narrow path. So I end up doing that, getting a degree in business administration with a concentration in human resources during my time at the University of Memphis, thanks to her and listening to my mom. And it was a great time at the University of Memphis. My first introduction, my first 2 years, I didn't even work in sports. Like, it was so hard to get in because at the time we had Josh Pastner was the coach. And it's just like impossible. Like, I would always go up there, how it is. Like, the guys are busy, recruiting. The head guys are not there, like director of basketball that they have. Like, it's just hard to get in touch with those guys. So end up like one day I literally was walking over and I saw a guy's named Drayden Terry. And I was like, hey, I'm trying to get into sports. I thought it was like tight end coach. It's like, you tight end. And he was like, no, I probably could have played some tight end probably in high school, but I can now. And I just had like sparked up a conversation with him, and he told me, he's like, well, hey, don't work like as a tight end in football or basketball or anything, but what I do is sponsorships for the game day. I do like game day sponsorships. So you're more than welcome to come in for an interview if you like it or we like you, mutual thing. We love to have you be a part of the team. So I say fast forward about 2 weeks later, I had got his email. I reached back out to him. He reached back out to me. Did an interview with him, ended up getting one of the positions they had part-time, part of their game day staff. And I had an interview as well with the guy next door in marketing. It's weird. They were like literally next door. And I was like, well, can I work both? Yeah, because I was like, I'm trying to get most experience I can. This is my first time working in sports. And they both let me do both because one of them was paid and one wasn't. But I still, gave 100% to both of them while I was there. And that kind of was my first introduction to actually working in sports. I got to see a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, working even soccer games. Like I worked every sport at the university, soccer, baseball, softball, basketball, football, you name it. They had a crowd, like I was there, volleyball. I worked everything. So it gave me an eye opener to like everything that happens behind the scenes, like the photo shoots that the players do, or what you see on the screen when they're like with their best friend, or like you're trying to figure out the hum of the song. It just gave me an eye opener, like everything that goes on behind the scenes working at the University of Memphis in the college aspect. And it gave me a lot of experience. So I'm definitely grateful for them. Tiger Sport Property, Learfield, and University of Memphis Marketing Department.
I pretty much applied to every single job I could find. Like 6 weeks in, I got a call from the Clippers. At that point, I applied to so many jobs. Of course, they called me when I was on the DC Metro and we were going through tunnels. I just hear, hey, it's the LA Clippers. I go through a tunnel and they hang up. And I'm like, of course I'm going through a tunnel right now. First of all, I couldn't even imagine that somebody from the Clippers was calling me. But of course, I was going through a tunnel and it hung up. And I thought that screwed up all my chances. Honestly, I think I only got the job because I showed initiative, because I was basically like, hey, I'll buy a ticket to LA and I'll interview in person. Basically what I did, I flew out there, told my boss at Abercrombie that I'll be gone for like 2-3 days, flew out to LA. And honestly, like that was one of the most amazing experiences for me, just because they gave me a whole tour of Staples Center. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I got to go into the Clippers locker room. And up until that point, I hadn't even been in an NBA arena. So to actually be like in Staples Center was one of the most amazing things for me. So like that flight out there, even if I hadn't gotten the job, was like totally worth it in my opinion. It was a sales job with the Clippers. So it was basically cold calling people, trying to get them to buy season tickets. And it was a room in Staples Center. So it was great because it was in Staples Center. The only thing is you didn't have a window. And then I think I was kind of put into like, there were 15 or 14 desks. And then there was one desk in a closet, like away from everybody else. And there were like 3 open desks and she put me in the closet. And I feel like that was her, like, I didn't really want to hire you, but since you were already here, it took me a couple of months for her to actually let me out of the closet and actually have like one of the desks. So, but like, I can't even, like, I'm like looking back at it, I think it's so funny. And like, I actually like that I was put in that room because I could focus more and all that kind of stuff. So it was, I guess it was easy at first because they offered the job pretty quick, but then there was a lot of uncertainty leading up to it. It was easy, but it was also hard. And I tell this to everybody who I ever work with who's like starting out, is you're interviewing all the time. You might not realize it. You might just be going to work, but you're always interviewing. And especially when people come to practices that you might not know who they are, go up and say hi to them. You don't know who this is or how, like what they do or whatever, but they're at your practice. And one aspect is just be a decent like human being, like say hi to people, like they're here, it's cool. And then on the other hand, it's like this person might actually along the line be somebody you work with or can connect you with somebody. Don't hesitate. Don't be like, wow, he didn't reply back, he probably is not interested in talking to me. Like I feel like you're missing the point of what networking is about, which is actually creating, I don't want to say friendship because it sounds a little cheesy, but like that's how I kind of see it. People have the same interest and you can exchange, and it's great because you go somewhere and you meet them. So you're reaching out to me and it really just seems like you're reaching out because all you want from me is a job, and I can't offer you a job right now. So I'm not the person to talk to about it. Like, and most people that you reach out to probably don't have a job for you. If you're really starting to talk to people, really just try and create a network. Advice. You can say you want a job, just don't, but it's the mistake I see a lot of people do, which is, hey, you have a job, or hey, I want this job and I think I'm great. And it's like, we didn't even ask if we had a job available, all these kind of other factors that lead into it. So it's 2 reasons. 1, I really don't have time, or 2, I feel like you trying to connect with me is not genuine. It's really just if I have a job, and you can tell really easily what somebody's objective is, because if you do respond and you don't have a job, that person pretty much never reaches out to you again. So you can tell pretty easily.
Coming into college, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to work in basketball operations. So everything I've done has been I've been trying to take a step towards that with every decision I've made since coming to college. Even at my high school, we had like senior projects. So for that, like I just interviewed a ton of people that work in sports and basically started the networking process early and put together like a little description of like what I found as like how you can break into sports. And who knows if I would agree with it looking back, 3 years now, but that was my start. And then I went to Cornell. I saw that as kind of the best option for pursuing, my goals. And we have a really strong alumni network in sports. We have a lot of really exciting clubs. The curriculum's really interesting, obviously. So I went there and I immediately got involved with a couple sports clubs there. Our Sports Business Society and the Big Red Sports Network, which is like kind of like the Athletic for Cornell sports, I guess. Like we do broadcasting and stuff, but we like to call it beyond the box score. So we try to do some hard hitting storytelling and really connect the like fans at Cornell with our athletes as like people, as human beings. So I got really involved there. I'm the co-president of BRSN, and then I've had my hand in a lot of different aspects of SBS, but the main things for me have been the research department, where I did some analytics projects, and then through leadership positions, both with the research department this past year and now this year with the club as a whole. I've been in charge of bringing in speakers and doing career services events and facilitating networking. So through that whole process, I've gone to build out my own network and kind of learn about how to connect with individuals in sports and just get a better feel for the industry. So between BRSN and SBS, as well as like trying to connect every single class I take to sports somehow, like I swear, like I was taking accounting this past semester, and in my head I was like, okay, how does this relate to like balancing a cap book in the NBA, right? I try to do that with every class. So between all of those and then the work opportunities I've gotten, I've really tried to make the most of it as far as working towards a career in sports.
I was selling $15,000 worth of tickets in a week when the full-time salespeople were selling 300. Again, it was just fluke luck because it was my first time and I just happened to have these friends. But unbeknownst to me, because I was down in the Nets locker room, Kenny Anderson, Derek Coleman, Chris Morris, Moogie Blaylock, that team, I was sitting there at a table. There was one other girl, Mary Beth maybe, and one other guy. So the three of us were just cold calling people. And so we even entered in a different door. So the people who worked there permanently didn't even see us. They didn't even know we were there. But then I learned later that the sales report would come out every week. And so my name's at the top. They're like, Michael Arcieri, $13,000. The next guy had like $400. And he was the full-time, right, which was almost, but again, I've explained why it happened. But this happens like a couple of 3 weeks. And so finally, this Jimmy Lamparello gentleman says, hey, you're doing a good job. Why don't we give you a full-time job and you can come actually be up here and get a cubicle and a real phone and be part of the group and not be down there in the locker room. And so I just said to him, I said, Jimmy, I appreciate that. But I want to be candid. I didn't come here because I wanted to work in sales. I wanted to work in basketball operations. I'll make it. I'm not a deal maker per se, by the way, John, but these things sort of come to you like necessity is the mother of invention, right? So I just said, look, Jimmy, and I knew that Jimmy was very friendly with Willis Reed, and Willis at the time was the GM of the Nets. So I said, look, if you get me in his office for a conversation, because I want to try to work him back, I told him why. If I can't make it happen, then I'll stay with you and I'll come work in sales. And he was a good man. I mean, is a good guy. He said, sure, man, I got you. And you heard it already on the podcast, but it was a Friday and Willis is sitting there, had a big mahogany, beautiful brown mahogany desk and a big black leather chair. And there's Willis, 6'9" and grayish hair and huge hands. But mountain of a guy, but at the same time, a really gentle, salt of the earth human being. Hopefully you'll meet him one day if you haven't already. And so I sit down in this chair in front of his desk and Jimmy's sitting to my right. And so Willis is sitting there and Willis and I just chatted like once or twice. So he knew who I was, but we were strangers. So, hey, Michael, Jimmy says that you wanted to have a conversation. He tells me you're doing a great job with the sales. And so he says, so, what's on your mind? And so I said, well, Willis, I've enjoyed doing the sales, but really I have a basketball background, a passion for the game, and I would love to help you all in basketball operations. Is something that's a dream goal of mine. So I'd love to join your group somehow. So it was like 30 seconds. It was quick. And so he kind of leans back in his chair and he says, hey, I said, well, I appreciate you coming in here and asking. He says, and then he puts his head down. He says, and kind of that doesn't feel it. Right? I don't like where this is going. It's a hard business and there's not a lot of stability in it. You don't make a lot of money. You're on the road a lot. You got to know people. And so I'm having two conversations, right? The one in my own head and then the one I'm having with him. And he says, I've got some contacts. Maybe I can contact some college coaches for you. So I motioned for a timeout. And I said, could I call a timeout real quick? And he stops. And I said, listen, I appreciate you taking the time to let me come in here. And I'm grateful to Jimmy. And I hear you. I know it's all those things. Obviously, you know what you're talking about. And I would imagine that there isn't a lot of stability and money. And so, but I'm 27 years old and I don't really care about stability. I don't really care about money either. And you mentioned contacts. As far as I'm concerned, I have the two best contacts in the state of New Jersey. I got you and I got him. I said, let me go scout a game for you. If you like what I do, you let me scout a second. If you don't, I'll come back and help Jimmy sell tickets to the team. Again, I like to refer to it as my one moment of coherence in my life. Being able to kind of think on your feet a tiny bit, not that it was any great thinking, because it was obvious where he was going. I'm not going to give you an opportunity. And maybe just what our parents teach us, it's not what you ask for in life, it's the way you ask for it. Maybe that appealed to him, but he just kind of smiled. I kind of, in my peripheral, I could see Jimmy kind of half smiling. And he just said, go outside and see. To this day, I still blank on her name. Her name was her. His executive assistant was Patty or Pam. I think it was Patty. But anyway, go out and see Patty and go get a credential for, it was the Big East ACC Challenge. And it was happening in Hartford. I said it before Providence, but it wasn't Providence. It was Hartford, because then Willis and I went to Providence 2 weeks later. Anyway, so I went up there. I sat next to Danny Manning's dad, who was scouting for San Antonio at the time, coincidentally. And it was, I remember the teams, UConn, Wake, Pitt, and Maryland. And, back in the day, man, this is 1991, right? This is an index card writing down information about players. So wrote my reports, went to the office the next Monday, walked into Willis's office, handed him the index cards. He took them, he read them for a little while. He reached into his drawer, he pulled out the calendar for the 91-92 college season, flipped it to me across the desk and said, go scout all the games you want to. Anyway, so that was just, when it all came together, because he was a nice guy. I'm not special. I didn't do anything. He just, the thing that I did was I was able to get into the building, right? The thing that I did, I was able to just coincidentally sell enough tickets to have Jimmy Lamparello notice me enough to have him offer me a position so I could say, hey. And so you've got to make your own way and make your luck, which I think I did. But none of that happens without the kindness of Jimmy Lamparello, right, and Willis Reed. And so that turned into a couple of seasons scouting with the team.
I had the pleasure of working with Garnett there and then working with KG in Minnesota for 2 years later in my career. So we developed a pretty good relationship. I learned as much from him as I did from anybody, just watching him prepare on a game-by-game basis, watching him work in practice, talking just the nuances of the game with him, working with him and our younger players at times. It was just a firsthand education at all times. And I was able to, as a young guy, study these guys. And that helped me later in my career, because you can always reference back to things like that. I always say I learned Doc really was a master of balancing egos amongst that group. That was my first experience in the NBA. So kind of, learning what it takes to to do that at the championship level. Seeing him get all these strong personalities and a bunch of Hall of Famers to set aside any selfish tendencies to really come together. We went to, Game 7 of the finals that year. We obviously lost, but it was a first-hand lesson in, coaching isn't just about X's and O's. It's a lot more than that, especially at the highest level. Secondly, you learn as much from the players as you will from coaches sometimes. And watching those guys prepare on a day-by-day basis was a first-hand education in elite levels of competition in what it takes to be great.
I was a PhD student at one time in chemical engineering, but this was the start of what I say is my PhD in basketball. And I think people who are in this business for a long time will tell you there is no end, right? There's always something new going on because coaches and basketball people are very smart people, and they're always trying to think of something new. Roles evolved into, like I said, scouting, breakdown video, a little bit on court stuff, a little bit, really just a jack of all trades and getting a crash course in basketball. And there were very few better people to learn from than Coach Donovan and his group. Really successful group, really humble people.
Well, honestly, my first job out of college was working at Enterprise Rent-A-Car. That was my first job out of college, and I'm like, man, I'm sitting there, and no knock to Enterprise. Enterprise is a great company, but man, I hated doing it. Just hated doing it. Hated going there every single day. It was working from 8 to 6. I was washing cars. I'm like, all right, man, I got to jump into coaching. I got to jump into it. And one of my former coaches from high school, Dan Preet, he actually got a job working at another high school, St. James in Hagerstown, Maryland. And he said, hey, man, I got a spot for you. I want you to be an assistant. There's no money involved in it. I got a spot for you. I want you to be part of the staff. And it was a no-brainer for me. So I'm grateful for him and Donald Shoplin. Donald Shoplin was the assistant coach there, kind of helped me bringing me on board. So that was kind of my first just jump into, the coaching ranks. And man, once I got comfortable within my skin with kind of using my voice a little bit, going through that first year of, kind of being an assistant coach, watching games, that was my first time, putting on a suit for games for the whole season. It was kind of different for me, but I enjoyed it, hearing kids call me Coach Fraction, Coach Micah, whatever the case may be. But that was kind of my first step. I coached high school basketball, St. James and Hagerstown, Maryland. And, I'm thankful for, Dan Preet and Donald Shoplin giving me that opportunity.
First, I want to start talking about my roots from, like you mentioned, Puerto Rico, just being a part of another culture and being a part of another culture, not just, in terms of a country, but also basketball culture, since the basketball culture back home, it's a little bit different also. We Puerto Ricans, we are very joyful people, very happy. We're family-wise, we all love to, be with each other. And that's also in terms of basketball. Teams are like family back home. And that's, how I was raised in terms of basketball and the way I perceive basketball. I coach high school back home, elementary school, middle school, club basketball, you name it. My mentor back home, Wilhelmus Cannon, he was the guy that basically showed me and introduced me to this game, you would say. He's an international coach. He is coaching, he just finished coaching professionally back home in Puerto Rico. He's coached in Mexico, other different places internationally. So he is very experienced international wise. He was my high school coach. He also coached me in different clubs back home. He's like my other father. He's my basketball dad. I would say everything, almost everything I've learned, not just in basketball, but life in general, has come from him. I decided to make the jump here to the U.S. 4 or 5 years ago, decided to go do my bachelor's in the University of Miami, the U, and also worked as a manager with the basketball program. That same year, I started as a manager. I got promoted to head manager. It was a great experience for me, just seeing how things worked in the NCAA, in the top level of the NCAA, ACC, top programs work. It was impactful for me that first year, especially because, you know, coming from Puerto Rico and, you know, then seeing all these resources over here, seeing all these coaches, you know, all these talented players in the NCAA, it was impactful for me. But at the same time, you know, it also helped me to, you know, coming from Puerto Rico, it helped me basically be appreciative and grateful and you know, also take advantage of the opportunity of, you know, being a part of a Division I basketball program, because, you know, all the resources that were there in Miami, I didn't have them in Puerto Rico when I used to coach. So, you know, for me, it was a very impactful moment in my life because it just opened my mind. It opened my mind to other opportunities, you know, to other ways of perceiving life. And, you know, I basically said to myself, okay, like I can do this stuff. I can do, you know, in coaching with all these resources. Wow. Like I want to stick around here. You know, I don't want to go back home. Obviously, I love Puerto Rico, and I love how teams, you know, the culture of teams back home, but, you know, the resources over here, you can't compare. So when I saw, basically, when I came here, it was like a kid going to Disneyland for the first time, seeing all these resources over here. So when I saw how things worked over here, I was like, okay, I want to stick around here. And yeah, I mean, I gave you a good little background story there. I don't know if I answered your question, but I think I did.
I was sitting watching pre-draft workouts with Phil Jackson right next to me. And it's stuff I could only dream of. And I remember my first week there, he had called me in, asked for a couple of different things, paperwork. And then he was like, all right, come outside and watch the workout with me. I was like, what? I'm an 18-year-old, 19-year-old kid. And I'm watching basketball with a legend in our game. So I don't know if to this day if you'd even remember me or not, but just the fact that I got to spend 3 months kind of learning from Phil and being around the Knicks organization, being in the war room, learning from a lot of great people there was really valuable in my young years. And it just shows what it's like to work in the NBA, and it gives you really good exposure to being in that type of office environment. So super grateful for the Knicks.
Thanks for listening to Gen Z Hoops. Make sure to follow, like, and subscribe on Instagram, LinkedIn, and all major social media platforms at Gen Z Hoops. You can tune in and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and every other podcast platform on the planet. Get ready for the next episode.